Okay. Oop.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. We'll get underway in just a minute or two. So I understand this is Independence Day in the US today, so appreciate anyone who's taking the time to attend live. Either way, tomorrow, certainly by Monday, I'll be sending out a link to all registrants so that you have the downloadable recording. So I'm expecting strictly Canadians today.
Over the living room residents moved in. There were lots of people in the house, but along with the people came a yard full of trash, broken windows.
Okay, so we're 1 minute past. I'll get started in a few seconds here now. Okay, so welcome. My name is Bruce Miller. I'm with RimTech Consulting, and we have a pretty big topic to cover today, which is to purview or not to purview. Pretty big and broad question. So I'll cover it as best I can. So let's get going. So before we even talk about purview versus non-purview, there are three things that I really need you to understand and understand well. Otherwise, the things that I'll be explaining to you won't make any sense. So the first is, where the heck does compliance come from, or should it come from? The second is, what the heck are case records and why is that so important when trying to understand purview? And the third is, what the heck is a content rule? Because I'm about to tell you that if you don't understand content rules, you'll never understand purview, let alone any non-purview decision. So these are the three academic things I'm going to walk you through first before we tackle the really interesting stuff. So first, what does compliance means? Well, in my worldview, it means that every document in SharePoint adheres to the official retention schedule, which means that each document has a retention rule assigned to it, and an appropriate one at that. So there are three elements of what it means to be managed as a record. Number one is the document is immutable. It cannot be altered, and its metadata can also not be altered. Number two is it's been assigned a retention rule, hopefully the correct one. And the third one is if the trigger retention rule for that record is event-based, which typically is 60% or more of all records, then all of those events and those event dates are all carefully recorded and utilized by the system so the disposition can act on it correctly. And what's the ultimate test of whether an EDRMS system is truly compliant or not? Well, the ultimate test is, can we do a disposition? And what does that mean? That means that 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years out, you'll press a button and blow away 4, 5, 6, maybe even 10 million records in a single keystroke. That requires a lot of guts, but more importantly, it requires confidence. How do you get that confidence? Well, you'll need to prove mathematically that you have achieved over 85% classification accuracy every single day in that system. Now, I have a YouTube video on how to accomplish that. So it's all about disposition. At the end of the road, we're going to now act on all those retention rules. And typically 90 to 95% of all retention rules end in delete. So that's what a disposition is really all about, deleting millions of records safely and properly in a legally defensible way. So again, to me, that's the ultimate test of am I compliant or not? In my opinion, 95% or more of all EDRMS projects on the earth are failures because they will never be able to do a disposition when the day comes. So we don't want that. Some numbers we're going to use here are as follows. Assuming 1,000 users, typical medium-sized system, each person typically receives 50 inbound emails, and again, typically 20% or more. I've seen it as high as 70%. At least 20% are meeting the legal definition of a record. So if we go with 20%, that means that 10 of those 50 are records that need to be managed. Then if we assume that every user produces 2 non-emails a day. What is a non-email? It's a document you either create or download or acquire. The way I put it mathematically is it's a document that exists today that never existed yesterday. And it's not an email. So those typically turn out to be 2. So in total, on average, for 1,000 users, most users will create 12 records a day, which is 2.7 million per year. It's a lot of stuff. So if you as a records person think for a minute that you're going to touch those records, review them, check them, fix them, forget it. You're attending the wrong webinar. If you assume 1 minute per record, then you would need 12,000 minutes a day just to quickly examine them to see if they're accurately classified. That would take you 25 8-hour days. So why am I telling you this? To get something out of your head, which is that in modern EDRMS, you don't touch the records because you cannot, okay? And you also know this ugly but true reality, which is that if we ask 10 users to look at a document, tell us whether it's a record or not, you'll get 8 or 9 different opinions. If you ask them where to classify it in the retention schedules, you'll get 8 or 9 or maybe even 10 different decisions. And if you ask them the same questions about the same document a month later, you'll get another set of answers. So what does this mean? This means that in the real world, we cannot rely on the users to do this. We just can't. So that leads to 2 schools of thought. School number 1, compliance comes from end users. They have legal obligations enshrined in policy to manage their records correctly. That's not a false statement. Okay, it's not. The second school of thought is you must be out of your mind. There is no way we're going to count on users to do that. Most of our users have never even seen a retention schedule in their entire careers. And now we're asking them to do this work 12 times a day. Just ain't going to happen. So we're going to have to come to impose compliance on the users, whether they want it or not. Two totally opposite schools of thought. So which one is right? The impose school of thought is right. Retention coming from end users? Wrong. It has never worked in history, never worked that I've ever seen it, and I don't think I ever will live long enough to see it work. So that means that we need to do automation. It's the only option we have left. And Purview out of the box does not do it naturally. It expects to do it from the users. More on that in a minute. So what this means is that declaration and classification has to be automated. We don't have a choice. And these are two realities that you've got to take right now, again, in order to understand Purview versus non-Purview. You got to understand some certain things about EDRMS. Number one is that your retention schedule will never be seen or used by humans ever again. Okay? It's a totally different approach to a retention schedule. And the reason for that is because it has to be fully embedded inside automated processes. And this has nothing to do with Purview. It doesn't matter what product you buy. This is EDRMS in general. Number two, you as a records administrator will never, ever touch or see your digital records, ever, because the volume and the velocity is too high. So what's the consequence of these interesting observations or realities? It's that the users will never be involved in records. You will never actually touch or see digital records. There's too many of them. They move too fast. So therefore, the system has to guarantee you something. It has to guarantee that you're going to hit your minimum classification accuracy rate so that you have the confidence to do disposition 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. Okay? There is absolutely nothing I've seen to negate any of this stuff on this slide whatsoever. Okay? So it doesn't matter what product you buy. You're going to have to guarantee, you're going to have to build, deliver, deploy the system to guarantee you, and in a manner that you can prove in court if necessary, that you are well above 85% accuracy, and that way you can do a disposition. Okay? So now, second of third of the three things you've got to know is what are case records. Case records are a massive point of failure for EDRMS. They form over 60% of all records, and they have a profound effect on how you set up your SharePoint. Why? Because each of the software products, and that includes Purview and Microsoft's 4 competitors, there are 5 products. All 5 of those products force you to say, what are you giving me? Is this a case record or not? They use completely different algorithms, approaches to trigger the retention rule. And for case records, they trigger on event date. In non-case records, the 40%, they trigger on the age, which they calculate by taking today's date, subtracting the document's date, which yields the age, then they compare the age with the retention period. So every single record, you have to specify whether that's a case record or not. And it's done in the retention schedule by specifying which categories are case categories. So case categories in the retention schedule or record series or buckets, whatever you want to call them, are really just another word for event driven, okay? These are records about a person, place, event, or thing, and all the records have to be grouped together in one adventure. Think of it this way. Case records are generated by business activities that are structured in the form of repeated adventures that come to an end. Classic example is audits. Let's say you do a health and safety audit in January. Well, that generates a lot of records and a final report. Then you do a financial audit later that year in November. Well, it's a whole different adventure, different set of records, and those records must be kept separated from the health and safety records in January. So each adventure comes to an end. So they each have a unique event date or trigger date, and they have to be kept separate. And the retention rule is applied to the entire adventure or collection of related records, not to the individual documents. Here you see union grievances as an example. So contracts, employee records, projects, those kinds of things, that's the behavior. They have repeated adventures that come to an end, and that triggers the retention rule for that adventure. Okay, that's what case records are. Now I have a full 1 hour YouTube video on how to handle case records. It gets into all the details you need to know. What about the other 40%? Well, we call them admin records. They are an ongoing business activity that never stops and doesn't have a rhythm of repeated adventures that come to an end. And the retention rule is triggered by the document's age. And each document gets a retention rule applied to it individually. Okay? Now, what that means is that in SharePoint, every time someone puts a case record into the system, SharePoint, must force the user via a drop-down list or some other mechanism what case this document is a member of. For example, if you have 1,000 employees and you're submitting a record on employee John Smith, then when you put it into SharePoint, SharePoint must force you to say, wait a minute, this is about an employee, which one? Which employee, which project, or which contract. And yes, that means a list of 1,000 that you had to choose from. If you have 1,000 contracts, 1,000 projects, or 1,000 employees, you've got to challenge the user with that list of 1,000. So if you're not doing this in your system, then you're not managing your case records, and you will never be able to do a disposition on 60% or more of your records, which means total failure. Now, that's 2 out of 3. We're almost there. Now, one more thing you need to learn in order to talk about purview versus non-purview, and that is content rules. I call this the beating heart of an EDRMS. Why? Because you cannot use any of the 5 products until you create these things. Most records professionals make a mistake, and that is they think this. They think, oh, I have a retention schedule. It's got a couple of hundred categories in it. With retention rules, I need to put those retention rules into the software, and I'm good to go. No, you left out the biggest single part of an EDRMS, which are content rules. Any EDRMS consists of 3 components. The record-keeping software, again, of which there are 5 shown here, SharePoint, and the retention schedule. But that's not the full story. The full story is what makes the blood circulate among these 3, right? So there are 2 forms of rules. One we all know about and one few people know about. Retention rules and content rules. They are separate. You have to have both in order to deploy an EDRMS. Retention rules are simple. You know about them. There's a trigger, a retention period, and an action. No big deal. Here we have 15 activities from the business activities from the retention schedule and a bunch of retention rules. But notice the retention rules are often repeated among different business activities. So mathematically, in this example here, we have 15 business activities, but only 5 unique retention rules. So here they are right here. So a retention rule in any one of these 5 products is just a unique permutation of a trigger, retention period, and a action at the end of the life. There's not many. Even if you have 2, 3, 4, 500 categories, you're likely to have only 50, 60 or so uniquely different retention rules, okay? What we're doing here is we're separating the retention rules from the activities, separating them. And now we have a list of 50 or so unique retention rules. So now we come to content rules. This is the part most people miss, which is the content rules do something with those retention rules. So having a list of 50 retention rules accomplishes nothing, absolutely nothing. They just sit there and do nothing. What you have to do is you have to build a content rule which says, for this content in SharePoint, apply this retention rule to that content. So there are three parts: a name, a condition, which specifies what content to apply the rule to, and the third part is the actual retention rule. So this is a really good example here. Now, content rules are on the left, retention rules are on the right. The most you'll ever have on the right is 100. I can't imagine having more than 100, no matter how big and complicated you think you are. Okay, it's just mathematical permutations. So on the left, we have to write these content rules. And in each product down below here, you'll see what that product calls these content rules. In Purview, they're called auto-apply policies. So here's how it works. Suppose you have a library called audits, and there is, let's say, 1,000 records in one audit, which is kind of small, actually. And one of those characteristics is a piece of metadata you call final report, yes or no, because you need to apply a long retention rule to the final report, but a lesser one to the items used to create the report. You don't need to keep 1,000 items for 25 years, but you might want to throw away the other stuff, what I call the digital debris sooner. So here we're saying we have two content rules for that library. If library equals audits and final report equals yes, we're going to apply retention rule 7, which is end date plus 10 years and destroy. What about the other 999? Well, they'll have for final report equals no, and we're going to apply this retention rule 5 years and destroy. Simple, okay? So in order to make your EDRMS work, you have to construct all of these rules. How many? On average, 3 per library, which in the case of 1,000 users, where a healthy EDRMS retention schedule has 800 categories, you'll be creating 2,400 of these things. So do you see what I mean? If you think that the retention rules alone are going to get you where you need to go, forget it. You're mistaken. You've got to build these content rules. And yes, they have to show up in your retention schedule because that is the digital equivalent of a retention rule. So this is what a modern retention schedule looks like, the one that you have to create to feed into any of these 5 products. You have to say, here is my business activity, here is the condition and the content rule shown in yellow that I'm going to use to apply these retention rules in purple to the content specified by that content rule. Okay? Now, as it turns out, you have to do it twice. So now you have 2 versions or variants of content rules, all 2,400. You have the ones that are in your records retention schedule. I call those the RRS content rules. They're English language readable. You see this? Anybody can read this and understand it. But then you have another class, which is the same rules, but now they're specific to a piece of software, one of those 5. Each of the 5 has a vendor proprietary language for their content rules. So you have to genericize them in your retention schedule and then play the game of the vendor for the actual rules that you plug into the software that you purchase. Okay? So you're doubling up your effort there. Now, this is what a retention schedule would look like inside Purview, not exactly what you're used to. This is what the software internal content rules look like in a product called Opus by a company called AvePoint. This is one of the 5 products. And there were so many characteristics of a content rule. This is one content rule per row here that I stacked them on top of each other because it was too wide. I think there's 36 columns in here total. But look at the wording, right? Nothing wrong with this, but this is highly software vendor proprietary. You can't put that in a retention schedule. No one would ever understand it. And who needs to? Only you do. So that's why I say you have to put English language readable content rules in your retention schedule, but proprietary ones in your software. Same rules, exactly the same rules. Here's what they look like in Collabware. This is a tab called Content Rules. And look at the elements of it. There's a SharePoint column called Department, which must equal Administration in order to apply this retention rule to it. This is Gimmal. Here we have the property, which is another way to say the SharePoint column, equals the value, right? And they have even a data type, which is it a text field or a date field or what have you. So a little different, but it's exactly the same principle, which is what content in SharePoint am I going to apply this retention rule to? Here's a look at RecordPoint from Australia. They got it, instead of going from left to right as I would normally would, they go from right to left. They say they have patterns and outcomes. A pattern is the condition, and the outcome is the retention rule that they're applying to the records that meet that pattern. And look at the same stuff you're seeing here. The site is finance, the library is reporting, the content type is this, and the metadata field annual report must contain whatever. And probably a yes or no, right? And then if that's met, that condition has been met, then they're going to apply an outcome. The outcome will be financial management accounting destroy 5 years after the creation date or what have you, right? So different approaches, but exactly the same. What about Purview? What does a content rule look like in Purview? Well, quite different. This one is a mini programming language called TQL. And the way it works is inherently simple. It is for conditions, for all the SharePoint content that meet this condition, apply this retention rule, 10 years, review, and delete. So here in this example, refinable string 45 equates to the library name, which must be audits. Refinable string 00 equates to column name of document type, must contain the value reports, okay? This is Opus from AvePoint. Very simple. Here we have apply term by. What's a term? A term is a retention rule. And everything between the if and the then is a condition. Once you meet the condition, you apply the following retention rule. So look at the same pattern again. The condition is the name column contains test, or the column approved equals yes, or the column approved by matches Smith. You can mix and match any combinations you want to get a condition and then apply the retention rule. So there you have it. There are, each vendor has a different proprietary approach to a content rule, but none of these products, Purview included, can possibly work without these content rules. It's your job to build them twice, once in your retention schedule in plain English, and once in your software in proprietary language. So again, as I mentioned before, in a healthy EDRMS, of which I claim there are very few, we have 1,000 users. You should have about 800 categories in the retention schedule, which means you'll be cooking up in your content rule kitchen about 2,400 of these things. How big a job is that? Well, I estimate that I have two estimates. One is Purview and one is non-Purview. For Purview, it'll take you a grand total of 10 minutes or less for a non-Purview product. For a Purview product, it will take you 20 minutes or more. So if you do the math on that, and you do in fact create 2,400, then you're looking at 50 days of work non-Purview or 100 days of work for Purview. And that's 8-hour days. So it's a lot of work to create these. And again, that's what people don't understand about a modern EDRMS. It's not about the retention rules. It's all about the content rules. Okay, so now with that newfound knowledge, if assuming it was newfound, then now let's have an intelligent conversation, an informed conversation about Purview versus non-Purview. Okay, there are 7 major differences between Purview and the other 4 products. I'm lumping all the other 4 together and just calling them non-Purview. Okay, because they're all so close to each other in capability. Number 1 is the posture. The posture of non-Purview says, we're going to automate, guys. There's none of this manual stuff going on. Okay. The posture of Purview is compliance comes from end users. They're going to pick the retention rules. You're off the hook. Leave it up to the users and we'll be fine. Not true, but that's the posture. Number 2 is Purview applies labels to documents. It's actually modifying the documents by sticking a label on like a piece of Velcro. It sticks an actual thing, a tangible thing, onto every document. That doesn't happen in any other product, okay? And they're called labels, by the way. A label is a retention rule applied to a document. It's literally stuck on the side of it. No one else can do that. Purview is not an application. The other 4 are. The other 4, like any other piece of software, buy it, you learn it, you take a training course, you curse out loud at how poor the training and documentation is, but you get over it, you self-learn it, you're off to the races, you're fine. Purview is not like that. No user will ever see the software. You're the only one who will, and it's not an application. It is not an application. It's a platform, and a highly technical one at that. And it's woven into the Microsoft 365 environment. Purview has no physical records management. The other ones do. Purview is not Purview. Think of it this way. Purview is a bowling ball, big, heavy, round, shiny, and hollow. Inside it is a golf ball rattling around. The golf ball is records management features of Purview. Purview is much bigger than records management. And here are 4 elements. It does a lot more than just records management. So Microsoft's view of Purview is very different than just records management. You have to get over that. You have to get to understand it and go with it. So you've got to learn a part of a greater whole. Number 6 is Microsoft Purview only works with the Microsoft environment. So if you have a lot of your records in non-M365 platform, then Purview won't help you. So if you need to manage your records in Google or Box or FileNet or something like that, then you're out of luck with Purview. And there's no email integration. Email is hugely important and often overlooked, sad to say. But you've got to figure out a way to get your email into SharePoint to manage them as records. At least that's my recommended approach. How do you do that? Well, Microsoft doesn't have a product that integrates the two. You can go off the shelf and buy several products like Harmony, Caligo, Ripstore. There's a half dozen of them maybe on the market, but you've got to get one of them. It's so important that the 4 non-Purview competitors each comes out of the box with one. That's how important it is. So even if you don't go out and buy one, you're going to get one with each of these 4 non-Purview products. That's how important it is. So here's what I mean by the posture. If you look at the 4 non-Purview products, they are all about automation, not about manual usage of records. Whereas Purview is the exact opposite. It's all about manually deploying with end users, and thankfully, it has an automation capability. What lesson do you think those 4 companies learned that Microsoft has not yet learned? They're going about it the wrong way. So it's upside down. You have to write it up and reverse that and forget about end users and just do the automation part in order to be successful. So this is my secret to successful Purview. Now, you'll hear me say this often. You'll often hear me say, I got a YouTube video on this, and I'm saying it again. I have a 1 hour YouTube video on the secret to successful Purview record keeping. This is what it boils down to. In Microsoft's world of records, compliance comes from users. That is so wrong. It's upside down. You have to flip it around. And when Microsoft says records management, they don't mean what we have been taught over the years. They mean their definition of records, which is Microsoft's way, okay? And you're going to need to know the technology really, really well. The bowling ball versus the golf ball. Remember, records is just a part of a bigger, much bigger whole. Therefore, its behavior and its deployment is very different than typical records management. Purview doesn't speak your language. You're going to have to learn it. It is completely foreign, kind of like Romulan. It is a completely new language. If you don't know what a refinable string is, you do not know Purview. That's a harsh thing to say, but I'm going to repeat it. If you don't know what a refinable string is, you don't know how to use Purview records management. Okay? And a refinable string is a very technical thing. It's very, very technical. I have advised every single one of my clients, do not even think about deploying Purview unless you have someone from IT by your side at all times. Okay? And again, it's not a software application. It's a set of features of Purview. So you have to really get into Purview deeply and understand it and know when and where to use it. So in the Purview, there are 3 things that I teach. One is what features to avoid because they're threatening or reducing your overall compliance. When to work around and find a better way to do something. And there are some features, most notably case records, where you're going to have to custom program in order to do it right. Okay? And that's a sad thing to say about any piece of software, but it's true. You're going to have to do some custom programming in order to fully and completely and appropriately deploy record keeping. And again, my definition of successful is that you can do a disposition with full confidence 3, 4, 5 years out. And you had to mathematically prove that you're successful. So the biggest single difference between SharePoint and the non-SharePoint products is the use of labels. Labels are interesting, and if you want to use Purview, deploy Purview, that's the game. It's the game of labels. The labels say, what are we going to do with this content, such as keep for X years and destroy? You've got to decide the scope, which is where am I going to allow these labels to go, right? And thirdly is how do we stick the labels on the documents in SharePoint? Well, there are 7 ways to do it. 6 of them are going to destroy your compliance. One of them is the proper and only safe way to do it, and that way is auto-apply policies. So I have a YouTube video on how to do that. The video, I think, is called Retention Labels in Purview, something like that. Now, here's something that few people take into account, and that is, what the heck do we do with the labels once we've got them on there? At 12,000 a day, you're going to apply automatically 3 million labels a year for 1,000 users, 3 million a year, okay? And if you're larger than that, just do a multiplier. These labels are quite sticky, very sticky. What happens if you make a mistake? What happens if you want to change a label? It is not easy. It is very difficult. So getting the labels on is half the game. The other half is what to do when they're already on, okay? So that's another YouTube video that I have, which is be careful here, okay? It turns out that there are 2 approaches to applying a label. 7 methods, but 2 approaches. One is use the GUI, the graphical user interface. In other words, go log into Purview, use its screens and its wizards, do your thing. Apply the label here, apply this label there. And the second way to do it is to ignore the GUI completely and go in and do it programmatically. Turns out that with the GUI, Purview has a lot of limitations. With the when you ignore the GUI and go in with custom programming, it has almost no limitations. You can do whatever you want, okay? So what you can do and how you do it will strongly depend on which approach you're taking with the GUI or with custom programming, okay? That's a little unusual for modern software, but it is what it is. Now, remember, I challenged you earlier. I said, if you don't know what a refinable string is, you don't know how to use Purview. I wasn't kidding. This is how you apply retention rules with content rules. Again, content rules in Purview are called auto-apply rules, auto-apply policies, I should say. So you have to use something called a refinable string. And I won't get into detail now. You can watch my YouTube videos on that. But here's the problem. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 business activities, SOPs, union grievances, contracts, and capital projects. And for each one, we have 2 or more content rules. They're pretty straightforward. And in order to write the content rule in SharePoint, you have to use something called a refinable string. Again, we're not going to get into the details today, but you can see here that I took in 4 business activities, I consumed or utilized 4 refinable strings. I was just getting warmed up. We have 800 more to go. Problem is, there's only 99 refinable strings available in Purview. That is a serious, serious limitation. You're going to have to find a way around it. Okay. Now, what's the good news here? Well, the good news is I can show you how to deploy Purview in 4 hours flat. 4 hours. Give me 4 hours and I will deploy it. And I will walk away, dust my hands off and say, job's done. See ya later. This is what everybody's doing out there. There's 3 steps. Step 1, enter your 50 retention rules. 2, publish them to SharePoint. 3, let the users pick whatever retention rule they want, whenever they want, and why ever they want. Here's the button in SharePoint right here, apply label. Okay? And that's it. Give me 4 hours, you're fully deployed, walk away. I will guarantee you, and I'll put my reputation on the line, that that will fail. Okay? Guaranteed. Why? Because users will never, ever get you even close to your 85% minimum classification threshold. Some people will pick the same rule every time. Some people will make an honest effort and get it wrong. Some will make an honest effort and get it right. But at the end of the day, you will never achieve the accuracy you need, and you cannot fix it. Why not? Because you need 1 minute per fix. That's 25 days of work for each 1 day of usage. It's just not going to happen. So this is the easy way out, but I guarantee you 3, 4, 5 years out, you're going to never be able to do a disposition, which is a complete and utter failure. So what's the fix? Well, wait a minute. Here are some more limitations. Number 1 is you're going to need IT assistance. Labels are easy, but it's what you do with them that matters. You've got to overcome the 99 refinable strings. You have to not care about physical records or use a third-party product, which is often fine, but it's a doubling of your effort. The disposition review process is broken. Let me repeat this. Purview's disposition review process, do not use it, okay? I have a full 1-hour video on it on the YouTube channel. Don't use it. There's an easy workaround for it. You'll need email integration. You won't get it with Purview. The learning curve is extremely steep, and the labels are so sticky that if you make a mistake, you're going to add a lot of work to undo that mistake. And SharePoint has a built-in feature. They call it a feature. I call it an embarrassment, which is people can put in documents without filling in mandatory metadata. Metadata is the secret to a proper EDRMS deployment. And you can fill in all documents all day long with no metadata. Terrible. So that's a huge limitation you have to track and fix. You really do have to get that one overcome. So what's the successful path? Well, there are 2 things not to do and 4 things to do. One, the 2 do nots are don't use retentions, don't allow users to touch anything to do with records. Number 2, don't use retention policies. And yes, I have a YouTube video on that as well, which is why not to use those things. And the 4 things you have to do are you have to create auto-apply rules, bypass disposition review because it's toxic. It actually destroys your compliance, believe it or not. And you have to deploy third-party email integration or you're going to be missing 80% of your records. And you have to monitor, i.e. fix, and get after the users to make sure you're not missing any mandatory metadata. So that's the recipe for a successful Purview deployment. So how do you make your decision of Purview versus non-Purview? Well, I hope I've helped you at least understand the Purview limitations and capabilities. It's more work, it's a longer learning curve, right? So let's go over each of these. If you're if you need to get your project up and running fast and score a success, go with non-Purview. It's easier to get there. And if your physical records are really important to you and you have to get there soon, then that's another reason to go non-Purview. If you can't convince IT to come along with you and do a lot of work for you, don't use Purview. Go with non-Purview, okay? Because the technical side of it will crush you and you need IT full backing. And if you have non-Purview records that you need to get a grip on, then go with non-Purview, obviously, okay? Now I'm leaving out short-term view for the moment. Why should you go with Purview? What would make me go with Purview? Well, IT wants it. I have seen a lot of organizations where IT says, we're going Purview. Oh, we are? Why? Because we already have the licenses for it. So why don't we just use what we already paid for? Fair enough. You are going to need substantial IT support. You can forget about doing Purview deployment on your own. Just forget about it. Don't even go there, okay? If the physical is not that important, and you have no need to manage records in third-party non-Microsoft products. Okay? Now, what about the view? Look at the red stuff, short-term versus long-term view. Short-term view says, I need to get there now, yesterday, tomorrow. Gotta hurry, gotta get there. I don't care about Microsoft. Then go for non-Purview. But long-term view says, who's going to be around 10, 20, 30 years from now? It's easy to say this, which is, well, what happened when Microsoft came out with all their other products? Remember how the world laughed at them? Well, where are we now, right? One observation that I have that I'll share with you is that in Canada only, in a 10-month period, I measured about 30 RFPs that came out for EDRMS solutions. Of those 30, over 20 explicitly asked for Purview. Now, I can't speak for the US because right now the US and Canada are not talking to each other and Canadians can't bid on US can't bid on Canadian projects. So my view has been shortened. But if that's a big, big trend, I can only assume that the trend is the same in the US. If that's true, then 2/3 of all of today's business, is Purview. That's a non-empirical observation on my part, but pretty valid. So if this is true, then we can say, is the trend moving towards Purview? I think it is. So what will the market look like 10 years from now? Will the other players even be there? I think so. I think they will be, but it's going to be a Purview game, a Purview world. Will Purview improve? Oh, please, please. They have to. They have to. When they came out with SharePoint, everybody laughed at them and said, "What a joke. What are we saying now?" So will Purview get better, easier, faster? I have no doubt whatsoever. And I'm not promoting it in any way. I'm just trying to be realistic and help give you some basic guidance here. So that's it. I'm going to open the floor. Anybody can open your mic and speak any questions you want, or just send me a question in the chat. We have one question here, which is, in a more federated organization, what are some key strategies for dealing with competing content rules participating branches of organizations? That's a really good question. I'm going to recast it in a simpler way, which is um, uh, in some parts of an organization, you'll have a content rule that sounds like this. If uh, library equals audits, uh, and then retention equals audit end date plus 5 years and destroy. But then you have another business unit where they have the similar kind of records, but they want a different or competing retention rule. It's easy to do with the software. You just write another retention rule, right? However, you've got to just tune the retention rule to the requirements of the other business unit. Are competing retention rules okay? I say yes, as long as they don't violate any laws. One business unit, let's say the legal minimum is 10 years. One business unit wants 10, one wants 20. Nothing wrong with 20, as long as you're willing to pay for the storage. What if we continue to use a non-Purview product for official records and Purview for the ROT, redundant, outdated, transient in SharePoint sites? Sure. Purview is a split personality. Purview has two personalities, records and retention. What's the difference? The difference is retention is not compliant. So you can use something called a retention policy, which is one rule applied to a place, not to a thing. So the place can be an entire site, library, folder, you name it, but everything gets the same rule. That's not records compliant. But you can do that to control the so-called rot. So if you have a library or a set of libraries that you know are out of date or don't need anymore, then just apply one rule to everything and off it goes. So answer is clearly yes, you can do that. Are the non-Purview products expensive? Wow, that's an interesting question. Really good. I can only give you some, excuse me, I just accidentally unplugged my monitor. Got to go plug it in. Um, the the price, I don't know what the average price is, but I would say the lowest I've seen is about $10 to $15 per user per year. And it probably goes up by a 3x factor depending on which product you buy. I'm not going to name, oh, hold on. Hold on one second. My screen share has stopped. Just got to plug in my thing here. Which of course is never as easy as it seems. Okay, so screen sharing apparently stopped, but you should be able to still hear me. Okay, so again, the price ranges from a low of about $9 or $10 up to a high of about 3 times that amount. That's what my experience has been. Okay. So it says here, what are good solutions for physical records management? Good question. Uh, there are 3 or 4 on the market. Gimmal recently purchased one, uh, an entire product offering for physical records. It's definitely a market leader, but I'm not promoting any one product over another. Um, there's very few good ones out there, but I would say Gimmal offers one of the top ones. I can't speak for any others. Say your organization is insisting upon Purview adoption, but IT does not have the capacity or training to champion Purview. What training would you suggest to the IT department to master? Oh, wow, what a good question. If IT doesn't have the training or the time, the capacity and training are 2 different things. If they don't have the capacity, in other words, the bandwidth or the time of day to contribute to both learning it and deploying it, stay away from Purview. If they do have the capacity and the bandwidth, where do they go to get training? Well, unashamedly, I would say go to my company and take training from me. Why? Because it's totally different than anywhere else on earth. If you look at YouTube, then in YouTube, all you'll get are feature tours, which is not real training. Real training means, how do I put this thing to work effectively? That's the kind of training you need, and that's the kind of training that I give anyway. Are there others like me out there? I don't think so, but there may very well be. But try to get training from someone who understands records. That's number one. Very few do. Number 2 is they're not selling the product, because if they are, they're heavily biased and everything is beautiful. Purview is not a beautiful thing. It's just not. Okay. So know its limitations. So if you get someone unbiased, you'll get the good, the bad, and the ugly, which you really need. And that's it. Yeah, that's the kind of training you should be seeking. How much ongoing time is needed to keep Purview going? Excellent question. It's mathematical. There are 7 things you have to do regularly in order to keep it healthy. And if you send me an email, I'll send you a list of the 7. And then if you're really keen on it, I can send you a spreadsheet which shows you what those 7 things are, how to estimate how much time it'll take. It's different for every project because it's driven by the number of business units and the number of documents. We've had a successful deployment of Gimmal, but they have a separate date field for closure versus last date on the file, which is somewhat frustrating. Well, now that's interesting. That's a small gripe. You better, my advice to you is you should pay more attention to the bigger gripes. With Purview, you'll have much bigger gripes. The single biggest weakness / shortcoming of Purview is its ability to deal with event-driven records. The way they recommend for it is not very effective, and we recommend a whole different approach to it. We deploy Purview, and we do it successfully, but we don't follow the playbook. We use the product, but we don't use it in the manner that they recommend, okay? So I think we're getting close to the end of the time here. But if there are any more questions, I'll stick around until we run out of questions. And I apologize for the loss of the video there. I accidentally kicked my power cord out. If necessary, I'll re-record the ending and bolt it on before I send it. Why do data governance people love Purview? It's because they're in love with the bowling ball and they don't care about the golf ball. They think the golf ball will take care of itself. Purview is a great product. It does a lot of stuff that's essential, like preventing data from leaking out that shouldn't leak out, putting protections on it so that only the right people can see it. There's nothing bad about Purview. It's fantastic. That's why so many people like it. Is it growing? Yes. Will it continue to grow? Yes. Will it continue to evolve? Yes. Will it eventually overcome its limitations? They must. They must. They absolutely must. Is it difficult to learn to implement the back-end records management in Purview? Yes, very difficult, extremely difficult. Why don't you go to my YouTube channel and watch, I've got maybe 10 one-hour videos on Purview. Just watch them and you'll get a good sense of what it's like to use it. Okay. And if you really want to dig deep into Purview, then take one of my training courses on Purview. I have a whole series of training courses where we'll spend the day teaching you how to use it and use it properly. Someone just recommended the Gimmal physical records piece, and I agree with that. I think it's a good product to use for physical records. The thing is that if you have two products, one for digital and one for paper, then you have two instances of your retention schedule. You got to do two dispositions, and they're not really linked together. It's way better to have one retention schedule, one disposition process that covers both at the same time. Okay, well, I think that that's pretty much it for now, unless there are any other questions. And again, feel free to open your mic and speak if you wish.
Bruce, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So when I asked for backend records, I meant like the records management. I meant more like the stuff that you said you were doing with programming.
Oh, you mean like creating the auto apply rules, the
Yeah.
KQL? Yeah, that is difficult to learn. I'll give you a taste of why I say it's technical and difficult. If you use the GUI, which you have no choice unless you program it, you have to create a label and you use a syntax that's called a property value pair, which is a property, a colon, and a value. You have to use the syntax exactly correctly. And if you, for any reason, make a mistake, it doesn't fix it for you. It won't even tell you you made a mistake. So when you deploy the rule, you have to wait up to 7 days to see if the label was applied. So that's a 7-day delay. And then if you find a mistake, then you have to fix it and try it again, and that starts another 7-day cycle. And worse again is that if it was successful, but it applied the wrong label or it applied the right label to the wrong documents, you have to get in there with a crowbar and unpeel those extremely sticky labels, right? And that's not easy, and sometimes it's not even possible with the GUI. You have to use programming. So that's a taste of it. We find that it takes us on average 10 days per content rule to apply labels. 10 days. Now that's not 10 days of work, of course. That's like more like an hour's work uh, waiting over a 10-day period.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, I really mean it when I say do not go into Purview alone. Just don't. Don't even think about it. Go in with someone from IT. And therefore, if you don't have someone from IT, then don't go with Purview. Now, are there organizations where records people are being dragged into it? Totally, totally. IT rules the roost, and for whatever reason, the CIO says, we're using Purview. Get over it. Fair enough. But they better support you, right? And one person made a comment that uh, that they don't get a chance to choose the product. And I find that too. I find that the more and more often IT departments are saying, well, we've already invested in Purview, so let's just use it, right? It's becoming more and more prevalent. Looks like I got my video back finally, just in time to leave it. And no display. Okay. Okay, so it's 3 minutes after, but thank you all. I really appreciate you taking the time out. And if you're from the US, then it's amazing. I will send everyone a email tomorrow with a link to download the video, complete with the power cord pull on the video. Okay, so thank you again for attending. I really, really appreciate it.